So, try to speak here.
What's that?
This is a tape recorder.
That I assumed it was something like that.
Yeah, this kind of so
I've never seen one like it.
Me normally I'm using the bigger ones with the old tapes, TDK and this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, is there any way that you can define your origins somehow?
My origins.
Yeah. Your radical origins, your philosophy's origins.
Well,
the origin of your ideas somehow.
The kind of the perspectives I go by, I guess, on what could be called the level of the intellectual, or what I've read that's helped inspire some of my ideas, would include Max Stirner, the Situationists, certain specific Italian anarchists that nowadays are usually called insurrectionary anarchists.
Bonanno and the rest, you mean?
Bonanno, Massimo Passamani, the people who put out Machete magazine, people like that. And I think at least with some of them that has been somewhat of a mutual back and forth play, unfortunately. Not so much with Max Stirner since he died.
You think that somehow you can define yourself also inside the counterculture thing? Early 70s?
I was actually raised in the Midwest in a fundamentalist Christian family, and my experience of the 60s, 70s counterculture was mostly from the outside. I kind of caught what was sort of the tail end of it on a more practical level, at least for the U.S. in around 1975, but it was already largely kind of fading, or
I think so, that around 77, 78 started completely fading in the US.
Yeah. So, in terms of direct experience, not so much.
But as a reflection, maybe?
Well, there were certain things out of it that affected me. Trying to think.
You try to think, or you try to
what
feel?
Specifically? Well, I suppose what I'm technically trying to do is remember what's more specific things, because I think I suppose my deciding to, in 1975, to drop out of college, take off and go hitchhiking around the country was something that
kind of a dropout.
Probably wouldn't have happened without
the counterculture reflection somehow.
Yeah. That was a major thing for me, since it was during that traveling that I pretty much threw off the religion my parents had imposed on me.
It must be a very strong experience to overpass this religion that imposed by your parents. Since being a born again, I mean, it must be really, really, I don't know, you call it born again, I think.
Yeah, well, I went through...
it's really difficult.
Oh yeah, I went through a kind of a nervous breakdown, and I was like...
It must be like this.
Actually... at a point of seriously considering killing myself, and it was just this... At one point it just dawned on me, it's like, but I could just kill God instead. And so I killed the God inside me instead. And then, because of the way I was brought up, it was like, okay, that was kind of what I was basing everything I thought about myself on. So it's like, okay, I'm still alive, but I just shattered myself, so now I got to put myself back together differently without that thing.
Reconstruct yourself somehow?
Yeah.
And you chose on that point to stick with, let's say, the anarchist that you described to me before, the Italian stuff, the insurrectionary stuff. What did you find really interested on that? I'm very much interested.
Well,
because Bonanno, for example, who was so much inside Hegel.
I want to say first that I didn't yet discover that stuff. The main thing I had, before I dropped out of college, I had discovered Tolstoy and become like a Christian anarchist, and I basically just kept the anarchist idea after I got rid of the God. But the thing is, without at this point knowing anything about egoism or anything like that, because of having to piece myself together on my own, I then started, I came to, okay, so I am where I start from. I don't start from any concept outside of me. I start from me. I start from me in the moment. And it was later I discovered, these ideas have been talked about before by other people. You know? And so it was because I went through that and having to do that. And so, okay.
Since you passed all this experience, since you made what I describe as a void intellectual, let's say, the great jump inside the emptiness, the leap into the void, I think then that your attitude must be much more stable in what you were choosing to do, since it was your mere fundamentally existence that was defining your further actions, no?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
and how come you? What did you find really inside the aspect of the Italians? I'm very much interested about that, because afterwards I'm going to ask you about Stirner and the rest.
I would say that when I first discovered the ideas of the Italians, a lot of it had to do with, I get the impression most of these people, not all, but most of them, are also kind of starting from themselves, often going different places than I would go, but still they're starting from themselves, making their decisions, coming to their ideas from themselves.
Coming to the great openness.
Yeah. And like I say, not all of them, but a lot of them. And, there were specific things where that I would read that I'd be very critical of. But to me, I like that. I like finding stuff I disagree with when it seems to be coming from somewhere real. Or I don't know if real is the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. That has something to say.
Yes, there's something to grapple with there. So that, I'd say, was the biggest thing. I mean, one of the things in the United States that happened is when some of these ideas started coming over here is people started latching onto them kind of more as doctrines and started thinking there is one set of ideas that is insurrectionary anarchist. It's like, no, I kept trying to explain, no.
No, this is not true.
There's even people like some of the Sardinian insurrectionary anarchists are nationalists, and a lot of the other ones are utterly anti-nationalist, and you get all these variations and other things too, like I think some are very much more centered on class struggle way of thinking, and others lean much more towards way of thinking that could be called individualist. Some kind of combine those. Now, and so it's like,
would you refer some examples of these three different paradigms, let's say?
well,
Bonanno for sure is tending towards class struggle.
well, he is, but he also has a strong individualist aspect in it, and because of that, I'd say he sometimes appears to contradict himself. Whether he actually is or not, I think I would have to talk with him personally to come to a conclusion about. I mean, I went through my period early on where I had a very strong class struggle perspective. That was kind of largely because of realizing, oh, I'm from a working class background. Now what does this mean? And then later on it's like, I ultimately concluded, it don't really mean a whole lot. I mean,
No.
so...
Unless you redefine it through your own consciousness, it doesn't mean a whole lot. No.
Yeah. But, I'd say some of the people, he was involved with are even more class struggle oriented. I'm trying to remember specific people. Names are not coming right now because they're not the ones I tended to read the most stuff by. But definitely very much on the individualist end would be Massimo Passamani, although in recent
Massimo
years...
Passamani.
Yeah. In recent years, he's apparently moved from that more into a mass struggle way of thinking, which I don't understand.
Many also
At
in
all.
Greece, they start tending towards this content and this containing of thought. I mean, and most of them used to be part of the large insurrectionist movement in Greece, which was flourishing at the end of 90s, early zeros. And now they turn to the mass struggle thing.
Yeah.
Well, I would like you to tell me tell me some of your thoughts why this might be occur. Is it that some insurrectionists really realize that the individualism doesn't lead necessarily to total freedom, which was the ultimate purpose? And they need the others somehow, or?
I don't know, because to me, going in a mass movement direction
we've been discussing this
is
also.
about losing the individual, because I don't see doing things with others as being equivalent to going towards mass movement. Mass movement to me is something where the large scale starts to be considered more important than the small scale, and the small scale gets suppressed in the name of the large scale, because otherwise, how does it become, what are relationships between people turn into a mass if there isn't a squishing down of whatever's individual in those relationships?
And how about these ideas that I was sharing with you a few days ago about the social individual?
Oh, to me, all the social individual, all that term means to me is individuals relate to others. It doesn't mean they suppress themselves in order to do so.
No.
And to me, that's all, like, mass is about suppressing that. Mass society is what I would argue we live in now. And it actually, to me, seems to involve a degradation of relationships between people. It has to do with conformity. It has to do with a lot of people doing the same thing, but often ignoring each other in the process, being more and more the same and less actually having real relationships.
But isn't that the thing of mass society, something like a context, somehow, which means, don't you think that the individual idea itself is another context, and somehow we need to overpass these both contexts towards something that is transforming itself inside and outside time, towards an understanding that these are just mere names and that function, and we can find a different functionality towards them if we understand that they're just concepts of the mind, games, sort of, in the way that Huizinga would put Johann Huizinga would put the game thing.
Okay, right now that was a jumble of words to me, to be honest. To me, it's like, obviously, I, as an individual, am a game I am playing, but the point is, in as much of a nothing as I am, it is still I who am playing it. I as nothing, I as unique, I as... so is all that other, but to me, there is no playing without players. And yes, players are just a name, players are just a word.
We could use
but
it.
There is no playing without players. Playing is also just a word.
Definitely.
And to me, it's like if you and I are going to play, you and I, sure, we're always going to get beyond you and I, but by becoming you and I. That's the whole thing. It's like this constant
transformation of the I.
Yes.
And of our integration, of our interrelation together.
Interrelation, yeah. And so, to me, it's like to me, mass, as I understand the term, and to me, it's kind of an unuseful term to me, except understanding it this way, is the suppression of that. And so...
so we come to a very crucial point. Do you believe in the possibility of consciousness transformation? In a social way, in an individual way, in both ways, or in a third way?
I would say...
this was a key word for the counterculture.
Right. I would say that...
But it's also a key word for void network.
The way I'd put it is, I would say, I transform all the time, therefore the relationships I'm involved with transform all the time, and I can be aware of that, and I can be willful about that, though my willfulness, because it's involving the willfulness of others, may not succeed in accomplishing what it desires in that thing. And I would say the combination of awareness and willfulness could be something that could be called conscious. So I will say yes, definitely to individual and relational, and relational, I suppose, can be called social. So the thing to me is that always, because of the involvement of myriads of individuals, uniques, creative nothings, whatever you want to call them. The thing about it is there's no guarantee it will go directions any one or any number of us want it to go, because there's so many factors involved.
Where is the matter of the element of the will in this procedure?
That
If we focus our will very much, can we determine somehow what our will imposes to do?
I would say we can determine what our will imposes to do. That doesn't mean it will necessarily happen, but that's the whole thing to me. It's like factors, myriad of factors, always. It's like I can know what my immediate and arguably for the moment what my longer term aims are, but my longer term aims can change in a moment because of what the next moment brings.
So somehow you are very open into the present. The
Yes.
way that present expands inside time, and in the way that somehow time itself comes from the essence of present, if there is such an essence.
If there is such an essence. For me, it's just I experience myself here and now.
Yes, definitely. Me too.
And
I strongly agree on that.
yeah, and
There's no other way.
exactly. And because
Otherwise, we lose ourselves in abstractions.
yeah, exactly. And you know, I can say in broad terms there are certain things that are not likely to change in terms of what I will like. It's like I don't even want to say try. I encounter as far as I have the power. I encounter my world as I experience it on anarchist terms. And so I think I could say that I'm not likely, I don't see it as likely that I will ever cease to want to see anarchy in the sense of no rulers, no one ruling over, as a way I'd like to see all relationships to function, which does not exist on that all level now. It certainly exists on a lot of levels now, but there still are states, there still are hierarchies, you know, and such.
Do you think we can make to overpass these hierarchies?
Huh?
Do you think we can ever make to overpass these hierarchies? Coming to a hyper conclusion?
See, I don't know. I know it's something I'll always aim for. I don't know whether we can or not. I know that in a long, long run, they'll disappear, if for no other reason than that the beings that create them will disappear. But to me, it's like, okay, and I guess I would say too, on like day-to-day levels with specific individuals, I suppose it would be accurate to say I and certain individuals overcome them with each other all the time. But those are individuals usually who, like me, don't want such relationships, and so we figure out how to interact with each other like that. Now, whether, say, on a global scale, you know, humans ever get beyond? I don't know. Because for me, I don't even know to what extent a lot of individuals desire that. And that would be kind of maybe desiring it, and even maybe getting beyond being dominated by that desire. So that
this is the objectivization of desire.
Right.
This is the most dangerous thing inside the les, for example. Or some other factors of the objectivization of body and the objectivization of desire. And do you think there is an interaction with the movements, the social movements, of these possible radicals that somehow thinking in the way you think? There is a possible interaction with the movements? I mean, here in US, for example, in all this cynical individualist culture that dominates everything after the defeat of the 60s?
Well, first of all, I don't think anything that could be called a truly individualist culture dominates things here.
Yeah, I mean, individualists.
Yeah, no, what's...
Consuming culture.
Right, no, that's the whole thing.
Gathering only the lower needs and the lower desires of somebody's.
Well, to me,
have sex, this, that.
Right, to me, it's like... it's like what... I guess what I see largely dominating in this culture is a highly conformist culture.
I positively agree.
And so it's just, to me, where I see the problem here is well, first I see most what might be called social movements here as that exist in this country as being so anti-individualist that they don't leave a place for kind of the way I think.
Maybe it's the Protestant approach, this stuff. The Protestant tradition that leaves this.
I think,
this trace on the culture. There is a certain repressing process inside the Protestantism itself.
Well, yeah.
A certain sense of absolutism that after overpassed...
Of what?
Absolutism.
Oh,
absolutism.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a major aspect of American culture. The Protestant influence, the Protestant moralism, the...
Moralismos.
Conformism combined with an atomization that gets justified. That's the whole thing. It's an atomization which gets justified with an ideology of rugged individualism, but that has nothing to do with individuality or uniqueness.
Uniqueness is a much more interesting word.
Yeah, it has to do much more with there being only one legitimate set of goals, and everyone must aim for those and compete for those. And that's where conformity and that's atomization that gets defined as individualism comes in. And to me it's like, but it doesn't have any place for anyone to be who they are in the moment and fit in. Which I wouldn't want to fit in, but...
Is there a place for revolution in this path?
In
this path, in the path that you are describing,
like my own perspectives.
Like your own perspectives. As to put it on.
I would say it would depend on how one defines revolution.
How do you define
I
revolution?
personally, and I bring this up because there are, not just in from my perspective, but right now in the United States, there are a lot of anarchists from all sorts of perspectives who have completely given up on the concept of revolution. And to me it's strange only because when I first got into anarchy and was already kind of, as I described, going along the way I'm going, and this is, for me, this is where the situationist influence comes in, is I read Revolution of Everyday Life.
Raoul Vaneignem's my favorite one by the situationist.
Yeah, and right there was a concept of revolution. It's like, yeah, that's what I mean by revolution. Something that is happening now, is going on all the time, and that never ultimately ends, because even if the state, capitalist institutions and all that disappeared, there would still be this constant ongoing transformation, this constant ongoing creating and destroying of oneself, one's relationships, and so on, so that there's this constant, just like,
This sense of revolutionary approach exists inside the science fiction book of Ursula Le Guin, The Dispossessed, very much. The key figure is a unique individual, Sebek, who somehow is revolutionary inside the society of anarchists, which is an anarchist society.
Right, yes.
You need to read it.
Yeah, I've read that book.
The Dispossessed.
Yeah, I might have to read it again because it was a long time ago. But yeah, and so for me it's like, I like this term this friend of mine came up with, imminent as opposed to transcendent revolution. Revolution is not something I want to see happen, it's something I do every day in my life.
This is also Boyd's idea, and this is the idea we presented in the first meeting about fixing up an anarchist federation in Greece. This was the main idea, our key idea on what is revolution for us. An ongoing thing instead of something that's going to be fixed, like occupying the Winter Palace somewhere in an apocalyptic future.
Right.
We're completely against this apocalyptic idea.
Yes.
Also, in this we agree, I think.
Yes.
In an absolute way in between us.
Yes.
And at the moment in Greece, there is, let's say, slowly coming up disagreement, a kind of ideological conflict between the newborn nihilism in Greece, as it's called, a part of individual anarchists that came up from the root of the insurrectionist ideas, as it is represented by the CCF and PHI in Greece. You know CCF?
Yes.
Action anarchists. And what is called social anarchists, where some people who used to be in the insurrectionist stuff, they enter this point, and somehow Void is somewhere in between. We try, because we are trying to follow our weakness, our uniqueness. So, what do you think of this current urge of neo-nihilism or nihilism, or is it a fitable approach for the Western societies in the 21st century? This CCF thing, I'm very much interested if you have any idea.
Okay.
What I'm saying.
First of all,
they don't believe in assemblies. They believe only in connection in between different fractions. This is the thing.
Right. Well, I will say first, I don't know a whole lot about that particular approach. I do know that it seems like it's people who have decided to take
The situation on their hands?
Well, there is that. They've decided to take certain actions and to declare them openly with an organizational name, even though I don't think it's formal organizations per se. And for me, my first thing is like, okay, in terms of actions you take whatever actions you feel like makes sense in the situation you're in.
They feel that
but for me, the thing is, I have been this claiming of actions thing is something I have never quite understood. It's like...
Yeah, please be more specific on that. I'm very much interested
when,
in our audiences as well.
When I first got involved with, or first started having interactions, relationships with insurrectionary anarchists, I don't know who might have done what actions other than people who, due to some error they made, ended up getting caught. And that's the only time when they would then, okay, they were caught red-handed. Okay, yes, we did this. Here's why.
And so many of them are being caught already anyway.
But the thing is, they never would. Before, if they weren't caught, you'd never get any declaration, anything. You might see an article written somewhere that says this happened, and then that relates it to some sort of social question. But very careful to never, no claiming ever done. And to me that makes much more sense if you are actually acting for yourself, from your situation, from what you're encountering. And so to me the oddest thing about these people in terms of what I know about them is putting out these declarations. We did this because of this, this, and this, signed whatever group. It's like, you seem, to me, part of it is, even though they're using a group name and not their individual names, to me, A, part of this is it makes it easier for the state to track you, but B, and more importantly, is it turns what you're doing into an image of action, into a role you're playing. And it's like, you think that role is really taking you outside of this society once you've made this a role? I don't think so. You're becoming something that is definable. Yeah, something definable as opposed to something unique. And to me, so it's like, that's one of the big things I don't get about that whole kind of trend. And then, like, I've read some of the communications. Some of them are actually beautiful and poetic.
Yes, poetic and inspiring.
But there are others which are just full of such turgid and moralistic language by people claiming that they're egoists. And I'm just sitting there, it's like, you say you're an egoist, and yet you're making this moral condemnation. So that also, it's like, that's a contradiction for me as well. It's like, so those are the things I don't get in that, in terms of what I know about those movements from what I've seen over here. You know, I'm sure if I learned more, there would be other questions I'd have, and maybe
these are very big questions, though. I strongly support this kind of questions.
Yeah.
I strongly support especially the question about the moralistic essence of some of the communiques. It's very certain. If you are living yourself inside the great openness, how can you be moralistic?
Right.
Maybe as a meditation procedure, sometimes you need to use your ethics, and that's final, since you are inputting yourself in this kind of morals. You're saying that these are the morals that I need in a certain time of my life to develop my own unique existence.
Right.
But if you transporting them into a higher level, which exists outside of you, in whatever is this you, then we have another abstraction.
Yeah.
And any abstraction is against pure individualism in the way I defined it.
Right.
Because I'm also very, very much individualist in the way you and the voids do, most of us.
Right. Yeah. So, I assume you've at least heard of the. I believe in most English translations they're called individualists tending towards the wild or something, the Mexican group.
Yeah.
You've heard of them?
I've heard, but I hadn't read any of their communiques.
Okay, they're
somehow connected with fire.
I would say ask Aragorn. He didn't they didn't print the book, but I'm sure he has a copy somewhere because he's friends with the people who put it out. But it's English translations of their communiques, and I haven't read through the whole book, but what I've read of it, I've read like the first 3 or so communiques in it, and just so much moralism, and it's like it actually made me kind of sad, and
It's very sad.
also made me it's there, and it's like so. And to me, it's like they claim they're acting from instinct. Well, to me, it's like, okay, you're using instinct as an ideological term here because...
For sure, which is an objectivization of the instinct, which destroys the instinct itself.
Exactly.
At the same time, any objectivization is an abstraction.
Exactly. And so... and that just makes me sad, because it's like they've obviously got an energy and a desire to be doing a whole lot, and they seem to
entrap themselves.
Entrapping themselves in ideology, moralism, and so on in the process.
So somehow another key was breaking.
What was that?
Breaking apart the ideology.
Yes.
If they were right on some point, the situationists, it was that point.
Yes.
Breaking up the abstraction, breaking apart the ideology, the ideological structure.
Yes. Very much so.
You've been telling me a few days ago when we had another meeting here in this beautiful cafe in Berkeley.
Yes.
That you're translating Stirner's work, The Ego. Would you like to tell me a few things about the way you are approaching this translation? Since you told me that it could be a very controversial approach of Stirner.
Well, the first thing, I'm going to give my reason why, and that is, even though I am glad Byington's translation happened, because otherwise I would never have read Stirner. At the same time, as I've been going over it, and also as I was translating Stirner's critics, which I finished, it came out in book form in January thanks to LBC and CAL. And so from translating that, and reading an Italian translation of Stirner's book, and then starting to go through the German, it's like there are a lot of flaws in Byington's translation which make it harder to understand some of what Stirner is doing. And so I decided I would, I've got all sorts of time to play with as I see fit, so I'll do a new translation of this. I'm going to do it under the title "The Unique and Its Property," which is closer to what the German actually.
Yes, the Greek is also in Greek is μοναδικός και ιδιοκτησία του, which means exactly the same thing with the German translation.
Yes, yes. And
The unique and his property.
Yeah. And basically, among the things I'm doing is there's certain terms Stirner uses a lot and uses in somewhat specific ways. So I'm going to make sure those terms are all translated the same way to clarify what he's doing. And I'm also going to put back in some of the things that Byington kind of changed because he wouldn't have been able to get it published if he put them in, like where Stirner basically talks about not being thrown in the shit pile, and Stirner puts not being put on the blacklist. Things like that. And then just to get what Stirner's doing to make it clearer, to show more clearly how the unique for Stirner, like Stirner never actually used the word ego. He did use egoism, but that was describing an attitude towards the world, not a belief in something called an ego.
Definitely. And it sounds very Buddhist to my ears.
No, he actually makes it very clear that any idealized the I, he rejects as much as any other, what he calls a spook.
That sounds very much Buddhist in my ears.
Yeah, and when he refers to I, it's like he's basically just talking in the first person, like I am. And makes it clear, I'm talking about. He makes it clear, I'm talking about the individual in flesh and blood here and now in the moment, and that if it becomes rigidified into an ongoing I that must be kept the same, then you've lost that. You've lost that in the moment, because it constantly changes. It's where, like, for Stirner, the unique and the creative nothing are the same thing, and it's this ongoing change.
The Buddhists would define this more like the creating empty. It's our own translation of the Sanskrit and the Tibetan and even the Chinese adaptation to English language. The word void and the word nothing. It's not about nothing or void. It's about empty. Buddhists also speaking very much close to what Stirner is reflecting on what you are saying about a certain sense of emptiness of phenomena. Empty ego that all the time transforms itself. Empty phenomena, empty reality. Not just zero, nil.
Right. Well, to me, that's why he uses creative, because if it's this ongoing,
that fits perfectly.
Yeah, and the thing, like in Stirner's Critics, he says explicitly, the unique is just a name. As such, it is empty. In each moment, you and I fill it, and then consume what we have filled it with, thus destroying it, and thus refill it again.
He says that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember his exact words, but it's pretty close to that. So, yeah.
You've been telling me that there were some Buddhist lectures that Hegel was giving in those areas?
Yeah, well, I know at the time when Stirner was in the university and studying under Hegel, Hegel was giving a series of lectures on Eastern philosophy, which to me would have to include
for sure
some Buddhist texts. I'm not sure what all.
Hindu, Buddhist, yes.
But yeah, and there's enough, like especially, I mean, there's enough in the unique in its property or in Der Einzige to already indicate that, but even more so in Stirner's critics. There are, like, I think I mentioned to you last time that one passage I was reading, it's like, that sounds like something out of the Tao Te Ching, except with unique instead of the way. and then I found a passage very similar to it, so to me it's like either, and it's possible, Stirner may have just come up with this on his own, but the fact that he probably heard lectures on Eastern philosophy from Hegel
Inspired him.
that probably inspired him some, yeah.
You do think somehow that Stirner, this Stirner's approach can be helpful in the so-called anarchy today?
I actually think in a lot of ways Stirner's approach would not only be helpful, it would, in a lot of way, it would, in a way it's I'd say it could be vital at least to a type of anarchy that wants to, or people, anarchists who want to be actually acting from themselves without
the predefinition,
an ideology or such coming to dominate how they act, and being able to
without the spooks.
Right. And to me it's like one of the most essential things. Like, there's this concept, and I'm not sure that the Situationists invented it, but I first heard it or came across it in Situationist writing, this idea of recuperation. And most people inspired by the Situationists who have a heavy Marxist tendency see recuperation as just whatever you do, it's going to be recuperated and there's no way to get beyond it. To me, it's like, no, there actually is. If you can keep on dancing ahead of their process, but it's the ability, this ability to, we'll say consciously, keep changing yourself, being ready to change and respond. And to me, Stirner's ideas provide a lot of tools for helping yourself to get to be that way. I mean, because of the recognition. My freedom, my ability to be my own is based precisely on me not becoming attached to a self that is constant.
Which is very, very, very precise approach on what dangers existing in desire itself. In desire that leads into a false understanding of desire towards a deep attachment to yourself, and afterwards grabbing everything around.
Yeah.
This is an idea that leads in all respects to extreme capitalism on the deep end of its approach. I mean, take everything, run. This is the thing. I mean, it's you only. Take everything.
Right. Well, and to me the thing is, there's a certain sense in which I, in each moment in my world, already have everything in that world. Therefore, I can let it go any time to go on to myself and my and that to me is kind of much more. This whole thing is like that's where, like, Stirner's concept of property is utterly uneconomic because it's like, this is already, in the only sense that's meaningful, my own. Therefore, I can let it go to go on and be, and change me and keep on changing me as I feel.
In that concept, you defined Stirner much more advanced than Marx?
I would say so, yes. Yes. I mean, it's funny because a similar thing came up yesterday where someone quoted a passage from that Marx's 1844 manuscripts where he's talking about the alienation of labor.
Yes,
and I
yes.
was immediately thinking, wow, that's interesting because Stirner also wrote about alienation in 1844. However, he saw alienation as a process that involved the whole of one's life and one's world. It wasn't just labor or economy. And it's very interesting to me. And it relates, his concept of alienation relates to his concept of property, in that for him, the opposite of property is what he called Fremdentum. Eigentum is property, Fremdentum is the opposite of it, which the closest you would translate that into English would probably be alienty.
Alien.
Yes. It was a word he made up. The word for alienation in German is Fremdenheit. And so he was obviously doing a play on that, and then he explains that sacred property, which includes all forms of economic property, are alienty, precisely because they are held sacred.
They are sacred, and the opposite of property.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yes.
Divine. Somehow. Sacred. That's the most accurate word.
Yeah. So,
Is there, where is love in the concept of revolution?
what is love?
Where is love?
Oh, where is love?
What do you think is love?
For me,
Less an
I
idea and
can't
more an
re-
experience?
Yeah, I was going to say I couldn't really tell you what I think love is, because when I think about it, it's like I think of different experiences, many of which are very different from each other, and it's often very momentary.
But that moment seems like an eternity.
Oh, it definitely can, although sometimes it can also seem way too short.
Yes, that's true.
I would say that when I'm not using the word love really loosely, that there is with love a kind of self-forgetfulness that comes, that's just, I am so immersed in the loving of whatever I'm loving that it's not necessary for me to be aware of me at that moment.
But somehow isn't that a sense of uniqueness?
Exactly.
A selflessness, uniqueness.
Well, that's the whole thing
This is the unique.
is
somehow.
for me.
So we're gonna consider it.
Right. Well, it's for me. It's like
That unique is full of love.
it's whatever self is there doesn't need to be aware of itself. So yes, in a sense, it's selfless, and that is, but it's because it's unique and just, I don't know. I don't even want to put words on it right now.
You think of coming down to Greece in a close time, let's say?
A whole lot at this point of my traveling depends on finding ways to get that unfortunate thing, money, together.
Yeah, for all of us.
Yes, It's like,
Resources.
yeah. And so I'm trying not to make any promises at this point, or even any statements. Yes, I will come soon, until I feel like I can say that, and it will actually has more of a chance.
What I'm saying mainly that is even more, if we make in a recent time find some kind of a few money to bring you down to Greece, you think you would be able to come, or you're so much attached with your project here?
I would say that probably,
because there is something going on mid-September or something. So.
Yeah, that I think would probably
be too early.
Be too early because of projects I'm doing with people here, things that I'm trying to get together with people here. That would probably be too early for me to
or afterwards.
Say that. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, because I know me and a friend who lives here in the Bay Area and a friend who lives in Southern Oregon are trying to get a few specific projects going, mostly involving publishing and distribution for the time being. And I want to see that actually get off the ground. And I'm actually trying to move to Southern Oregon because I'm tired of living in the city. Want to get somewhere where I know some people, can do projects with people, and be out of the city. And that's a major personal project I'm working on. So those are two big things. Now, obviously, the Stirner translation I could work on anywhere. So.
Yes, for sure. and we can be really helpful on whatever you need if you make it.
Yeah.
Have you made to read anything by Castoriadis and anything?
What's that?
By Castoriadis, the imaginary institution of society.
Castoriadis.
Not that much.
I read a long time ago.
Do you find any interesting ideas on that?
A few things. Well, I didn't read that specific book. What I read was stuff that, do you know the London Solidarity Group? Stuff they published, short things. And at the time, when I read it, I found some interesting things. I especially found aspects of his critique of Marx interesting,
Yeah, but beyond that, the idea of direct democracy and all that stuff.
Now that, I'm not really particularly interested in democracy. I figure, people, when they get together and have to decide things, they'll probably use something that could be called direct democracy. There's not an authority, but as a concept, it doesn't really particularly interest me.
Yeah, but in a large scale, it's much more difficult to come in a full consensus.
No, well.
This is why.
That's the whole.
This is also a continuous discussion on my mind about that.
Right. Well, the thing with me.
Fully about consensus thing.
Well, the thing with me is. Because I don't really accept the idea of a group decision that then applies to everyone in the group. It's
I strongly agree on that.
More.
No depression.
The question is more if there is something that, quote unquote, we all, as in a large group of people, decide this needs to be done in this area that we're sharing with each other. How do we go about doing it? I assume most likely way would be something on the level of some form of direct democracy. Just, okay, we got to get this done, so we got to make decisions about it. So let's do it. And I agree with you.
Yes, because from a practical point of view.
And I agree with you that on that consensus, as that word is usually used among anarchists, just is going to be, that would be a big pain in the ass to try and do that. Would probably ultimately end up with the loudest voices are the ones who actually are making the decisions, because you'll get the point of like, okay, I'm not going to argue anymore when the person doesn't really agree.
But this is a kind of repression as well, sometimes. So somehow I think that concessional collective decision system is something like you need really developed people that are ready to leave their own egoistic approach sometimes just towards the ultimate goal of the circle.
Right. No, it's like one of the things I will say.
You need to be very civilized, very developed.
Right. Well, one of the things to me is that there have been all these people who have worked out the organizational structure that they think will allow anti-authoritarianism to actually operate. It's like, I don't think it's a question of organizational structures. It's a question of individuals who have become
concerned of their own condition.
Yes, and concerned of their own condition and strong enough to not let themselves be dominated
by these conditions.
Yes, and who then, when they interact, are going to be fully coming from where they want, but with an openness, and that's the important thing, but with an openness where it's like what they want might change. Okay, we all seem to have agreed we want this, so the how to get there, okay, I at first thought this, but not, it looks like maybe this would be a better way to get there or whatever. That's where the openness to me comes in, is you aren't going to let yourself be dominated, but you are going to realize, that might be a better approach to getting to this thing. And if you don't agree with what seems to be most people want, like, okay, I don't want this. I can either try and convince everyone else that they're wrong, or most of the rest that they're wrong, or
do my own.
I can go off and separate from this.
So about a few key contexts, like a general narrative that unifies the idea of reacting and confronting the system, and apart from that, the creation of a new myth, or using of a new myth that will help in the radicalization of people's approach. And thirdly, is anarchist somehow anarchy idea? Anarchy, no, not an idea, I don't like this word. Anarchy concept can be destructive enough towards the institutions of the formal societies of both East, West, South and North.
I'm going to ask you to repeat that, because I'm not sure I got all of what you were saying.
Broke the general narrative, the Hegelian narrative, the revolutionary narrative, in small sub-narratives. I mean, we weren't speaking anymore about the general movement, we were speaking about the feminist movement, the ecological movement, the anti-authoritarian part of this movement and all that stuff. Personally I believe we need to create a myth of a general narrative that somehow includes all the different movements inside under their own identity. Something like a glue, which is mythical in the way that there is no glue like this, apart from what we imaginary projecting to ourselves. And we need all the time to be very pretty critics on what we are projecting, and therefore not get attached on this we are projecting, but using it in the means we use a reflection of idea that a car, for example, is. A car is an idea that is materialized in that way. And as a third aspect, is there a destructive force inside anarchy? Bakunin spoke about that, Bonanno spoke about that.
What's
Bakunin and Bonanno had spoken about the destructive force of anarchy. Is there a destructive force of anarchy inside anarchy itself that can reboot the whole idea of culture and modern institutions in our society?
Is there? I don't know if there's one that can reboot the...
Nothing like a closed system.
Right. I mean, I will first say that I am not... Like, culture to me is, of course, one of those words that's so broad that I would never say I am for or against culture, because like culture, that can mean all sorts of different things.
Yes, I'm not against culture either.
No.
But there are certain aspects in the dominant culture.
Or the dominant culture, yes.
This is what I'm saying. When I'm referring to culture, I'm referring on the dominant culture. Destructive force against the dominant culture.
Right. As to the... Like, to me, I think where the destructive force against the dominant culture probably most lies in anarchy is and I'm not saying, I don't want to be misunderstood, but I'm going to say it first, the refusal to be ruled, and where I don't want to be misunderstood is like...
It's quite clear.
Okay, if it's clear to you, I won't explain. But...
No, explain it.
Oh, okay. What I was going to say is, obviously, there are situations where, despite all your refusal to be ruled, you get ruled. Like... when the cop puts the handcuffs on you, something like this, you know. So, and some people, when I've talked about the refusal to be ruled, said, well, what about when the cop does it? No, I'm talking about a way of confronting life. And to me, that it's that refusal that, because part of that refusal is expressed in a variety of practical forms that basically forms that pull the rug out from under authority, and among them, I mean, included in that is, for instance, the refusal of the concept of sacred property. People who don't accept the concept of sacred property don't feel obliged to follow all of the fetishistic rules that are the economy. You know, I was talking with someone the day before yesterday, about how, contrary to what Marx tried to claim, economy is top to bottom a metaphysical entity of fetishes and sacred things.
I so much agree on that.
And
it's completely metaphysical.
Yeah. And so, people...
And that's why the new totalitarianism is based so much in this certain mystification of economy, because this mystification already exists.
Yes.
In the way that we get taught of what economy is and what's not.
Yes. And so, and someone who doesn't accept this, well, just an example is there is this place in the southwest of the United States. Some friends of mine are there, and it's this fairly vast high mesa. I wouldn't live there simply because I don't like the extremes of weather, and I don't like the fact that at 8,500 feet above sea level, I seem to have trouble breathing. But there's a bunch of people who live there. A few of them legally own property there. Most of them don't. Why? Because they don't recognize the sacredness of the property, and they just, oh, I can go here, I can live here, I can take care of my life here. And that already then opens to them a lot of opportunities for other activities they can do, aside from, in this small scale, undermining the power of the state in that little area. Now, not completely, but, and to me it's like, that's cool. Now, most of them, my friends there are anarchists, most of them are not. They're just people who don't.
But in the same time,
want to live.
But in the same time, there is so much inside the social idea what anarchy can be. If they do exactly something beyond the dominion of the state. And that to me is like one of the, just one example of something people who have escaped the idea of the sacredness of property. The idea of the sacred property is something that is already anarchist, even if you don't define yourself as an anarchist.
Right.
Even if you are beyond the anarchist ideology, which anyway can be defined also as another ideology.
Oh yeah.
We need to be free of that spook. Also.
Oh yeah. And like when I think in terms of myths, I'm suspicious of all myths, but if you play the same sort of hopping game I talked about before with it,
dancing around.
And to me, one myth that can sometimes come in and I think have an interesting, do some interesting things, at least in the U.S., is the myth of the outlaw. And playing with that myth, and like
in Europe too.
And I say outlaw,
which is a much more surveilled society.
Yeah. And to me, it's like outlaw has a kind of specific meaning to me that's different from criminal. That
for me too.
A criminal
always it was like this since I was 16.
Yeah, because for me, a criminal actually, I use that word for someone who looks upon what they're doing as their way, the way they make their living in this society. And so,
but the outlaw is somebody who tries to come beyond society.
Exactly.
And it's a key myth, the myth of the outlaw, inside the counterculture. The 60s. It's a key myth.
Oh yes.
I was still remembering reading about books in those days and listening to songs of psychedelic rock and all that stuff. We're speaking about the outlaw's idea and all that stuff. It was 1985. I was 15 years old.
Oh yeah. No, and I'm actually right now. This is just for fun, but I'm reading a novel that kind of comes, a writer who kind of comes out of the counterculture, and his early novels in particular tended to kind of play on the outlaw theme. Tom Robbins' Still Life with Woodpecker. I've read it 20 or 30 years ago, and I decided to reread it because it came up in a conversation recently. He plays on the outlaw concept there.
Yeah, very much. It was so deep inside. It was a manifestation of the counterculture, the general context of the outlaw.
And
it was a key myth.
And another novel like that. Right? Oh yeah. But this is a novel I would recommend if you haven't read it.
Yes.
Stone Junction by I think his name is Jim Dodge, if I'm
No,
remembering
this I
right.
hadn't
Yeah,
read.
that one is another one, like, kind of... The guy, actually, who wrote it was living in a commune in Northern California in the 1990s.
Wow.
Where he wrote this. Stone Junction is thoroughly like an outlaw
Can you remind me
counterculture.
again the name of the writer?
Jim Dodge, if
Dodge.
I'm remembering right. Yeah. And
Stone?
Stone Junction. And very good.
That's it for the moment.
Okay.
Let's relax now a little bit.
Very good.